Well, hey there, everyone. It's Sue here, and I am joined live today with Ava Bell. And Ava is an amazing makeup artist. She is currently living in Byron Bay in beautiful northern New South Wales, just over the border from Queensland. Ava has a really interesting story in that she's an Australian makeup artist and she has worked all over the world. And I know that this is a dream for a lot of makeup artists to be able to travel, work overseas. She's worked on Fashion Week in London, Paris, New York, and Sydney. She has done luxury weddings in beautiful places like Paris and in Italy, and she lived for quite a while in Paris as well. Ava's back here in Australia now, working as a luxury hair and makeup artist. And I'm very, very excited to chat with Ava about how her career has come about. So Ava, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's interesting to hear it back at myself like that. Sounds much more glamorous and impressive than when you're living the journey. So yeah, wow.
Well, I guess that's it, isn't it? You know, people look at our industry and they think, oh my gosh, it's so glamorous being a hair and makeup artist. But the reality is that there is a lot of hard work that goes on behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
So before we get started and talk about, you know, your glamorous life there in Paris and in Europe, tell us a little bit, Ava, about how you actually got started as a makeup artist. Were you always a makeup artist? Did you do something else before that? And, you know, how you got into this exciting, glamorous career?
Well, I definitely wasn't always a makeup artist. I've had quite a few career changes in my time. I started out when I was very young singing and acting. So I was kind of in the performance arts world and space. And I used to be in a lot of theatrical productions and kind of quite professional productions, even from when I was 10 years old. And I think for me, the makeup journey was a very parallel kind of thing that happened alongside my acting and theatre background, because I was surrounded by all this creativity and I was surrounded by this transformation process of seeing people arrive into the backstage area. And there was this one moment for me that kind of really stands out. And I was 10 years old and I was working on a musical theatre production. It was a big show of 50 years of celebrating women in music. And I was playing Judy Garland. So I was like the only kid in the show. And this man walks in and sets up a little box next to me and starts to sort of pull out all this makeup. And I was just in awe of this magical little box and what he was going to do. And I watched him transform from a man into a drag queen, because he was playing a woman in the show. And it was just this absolute kind of revelationary moment of, oh my God, like the power of this magical box. And I remember that moment so well, and it really ignited something in me that was awe-inspiring, I guess. And so as I continued down my path of being in musical theatre and acting and singing, the makeup just always kind of took my interest as I watched the makeup artists behind the scenes. And eventually, when I was 22, I was in Sydney, and I was working as a children's entertainer, being a fairy. So that was another career. I've had many different hats that I've worn. They all kind of center around creativity, art, music, and tie back into that space. And I went and decided to study makeup full time, just purely out of interest. At that point, I didn't even want to be a makeup artist in particular. I just had this passion and this pull towards it, and had time on my hands because I was just working on the weekends. And so I went and studied. And and then it's been a long journey from there.
Yeah, and it's interesting how people say that. You know, I remember when we interviewed Mia Connor, she talked about how she initially did a makeup course to learn how to do her own makeup. So for her as well, it wasn't about, she didn't kind of get into or do her course planning to become a makeup artist. So it's interesting hearing that from you as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, initially it was like, oh, I might just do a couple of days a week or a few hours a week and study makeup because I like it and it's interesting and it might add something to my theatrical performances. And then the course that happened to be available was at 3 Arts, and it was full-time, 4 days a week. And I thought, well, that's quite a commitment. Yeah. But something about walking into that building and meeting all of the the instructors and seeing the makeup studio, I just kind of wanted to be there. And I thought, oh, it's a bit more than I kind of intended to commit to, but I got completely drawn into this world, and it kind of took me, and I just went with it. And I found that I had a natural kind of talent with it that surprised me. I found myself doing prosthetic makeup and things I'd never really even known existed or dreamed of, that just took me away into this new creative, amazing outlet and world. So, I got swept up in it, and it took me on a new journey.
Yeah, yeah. And it does that, yeah. So when you first came out of makeup school, what was your focus at that time? And, what was your experience your first couple of years?
To be perfectly honest, again, because I didn't plan to be a makeup artist, it was probably a year where I went traveling after makeup college. I didn't do any makeup, and I didn't have any intention of doing any makeup. And it was only that I bumped into one of my college tutors about a year after I'd finished, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing with your makeup?" I was like, "Not much, to be honest." And he said, "Oh, well, I'm doing a fashion shoot tomorrow with this great photographer. I need an assistant. Do you want to come help out?" I was like, "Okay." And so I rock up on set. And again, this magic kind of took hold of me, of being on set, seeing the model, seeing the fashion, seeing it all come together. And from that point, I started assisting him, and he did special effects crossover with fashion. And it just kind of started opening up all these paths. And again, I was on this makeup path, and it took me into this kind of new world, and I went with it. So again, it wasn't something that I had planned or really followed through with myself intentionally. It was just something that by chance happened, and I went with it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's interesting that you say that artist that you're assisting who did the crossover between special effects and fashion, because that's not something that you find very often, is it?
No, he was quite a rare person in the industry, that he kind of got into it as, I don't know, I see a lot of the male artists, they either come in through fashion or they come in because they're sci-fi geeks, for lack of a better word, and they're really into that movie kind of prosthetic thing. He was from that world, but then was really good at doing female fashion makeup. And so he kind of had that crossover, which was a rare, unique combination. And I got to see sort of both sides of it. So it was great working with him. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that reading your bio that you sent through to me, that you have also, obviously you've done a lot of luxury bridal, which I mentioned, and worked on fashion weeks. And I didn't mention a lot of the publications where you've seen your work. But you also mentioned that you have done some prosthetic work and worked on some big movie sets as well. So talk to us a little bit about that. How did that come about?
Well, I always loved body painting, and because I had a passion for art and growing up, always painting and drawing just as a kind of hobby. When I came out of makeup college, those were the skills that really, I guess, I shone in, was the artistic, the kind of more creative style of things. And so I started to get a lot of work doing body painting, which led me into doing nightclubs and events. And that was really good bread and butter. It was kind of where I made my money when I was assisting in Sydney to do fashion. There's so many different areas that I've worked with in the industry, and one has fed into the other, which has fed, and it's kind of just been this layering of different skills and different experiences, and one thing kind of feeding the next while I was working out what I was going to do. There was no direct path. And if I had have known now, looking back, I probably would have gone on a more direct path, but hey, here I am. So to come back to your question, how I ended up doing film, I had a friend who worked in the film industry, and I had this background in being able to do tattoos, body painting, airbrushing, and I'd worked with a special effect artist, which was kind of a unique set of skills. And there was a film that came up and they needed those particular skills. And so when she put my name forward, and the head of the makeup department for Pirates of the Caribbean was looking for people in the North Coast area, I just kind of got in there. So it was just this amazing opportunity to go straight into a really incredible film set, just the highest of the sort of industry that you can imagine working in. I just felt like, oh my God, you're walking in there using my skills, and it was great, but it was a bit intimidating. It was a bit scary. I felt like the newbie on set for sure. And that was a very exciting experience. But film's a whole other area again.
Yeah. I remember when I was teaching diploma of makeup gosh, it must have been about 6 or 7 years ago now. And one year we secured work experience for our students to go and work on, I think it was the third, was one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I think it was the third one. Might have been one of the different ones. But so they would go and start at the start time, which was usually like 4 a.m. and they'd work, they'd do a 4-hour shift. And then from there, they would have to come to college.
Oh, wow.
And and then spend the whole day at college. And I remember those students, you know, that they were so excited to be going, and they'd arrive back at college, and it was interesting. Some of them would be absolutely buzzing because they just had this incredible experience, and others were absolutely dead. And I'm like, I can see who are the ones that are going to pursue this career.
Exactly.
In film.
Absolutely. I think we were doing night shoots. So we were starting at 3 p.m, doing their hair and makeup and prosthetic applications to get actors on set by 8 p.m. kind of time frame, because there was a lot of actors and it was pretty full on.
Yeah.
And we were shooting right through until like 6 a.m. finishing up, and then had to take all of the makeup off them. And we were in, you know, still, it just felt like the longest nights ever, because you're out on the actual set, which was outside. So we're out in the elements, in the rain, you know, on set with these actors, and then having to finish up at like 6-7 o'clock in the morning. You get your couple of hours turnaround by the time you've slept, eaten, you know, cleaned everything, and you're back on set again. So for me, that stamina was just not conducive with my personality or lifestyle. I was like, oh, I've been too accustomed to working on weddings where it's 6 hours in, out, done, and 3 o'clock in the afternoon off to have lunch. So
exactly.
it was wonderful, but I just couldn't see myself doing it in a long-term kind of way. But I think the thing that I will say about film that is really amazing is that you've got a community, and you really really grow with your family and your team of people that you're working with. And having that as a makeup artist was so nice for a change, because when you are a freelance artist and you're out on your own, it's just you know. Sometimes now I've got a team, but you know, for many years it was just me, and there's no community, there's no one to help, you know. It's like you're just out there working hard on your own. And being in a film set, it's like you grow with these people and you become a community, and it's a family, and it's a completely different kind of way of being involved in the industry. So, you know, every industry's got its pros and cons, and you just got to work out what works for you and your personality and your stamina abilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've touched on a really interesting point there, the fact that being a freelancer is a very lonely it's a very lonely road, you know, and it's something that we talk about in my makeup mastermind group quite a bit, you know, and that importance of having that circle, those artists that are going to be there and have your back. And it's something that I recommend to everybody. And not only because there are a lot of ups and downs in being a freelancer and in this industry, but even just the things as simple as having someone to refer work to when you can't do it.
Absolutely.
And vice versa. So
100%.
Yeah, and what I think an interesting point that you've made, well, you've made the point several times, is that, you know, you got into fashion because of someone that you knew who invited you to go and assist. You got into film because of someone that you knew that, you know, that obviously told you that they needed that particular skill set that you have. And I think that we can't underestimate, or we can't, you know, under stress the importance of your network when you are trying to build a freelance career.
Absolutely. You never know where that next job's going to come from. I've always had the philosophy of say yes to everything.
Yeah.
It's only just now, 13 years in, I've, for the very first time in my career, started to sort of say, oh, maybe not, just only for the reason that my time has become really exhausted, and I'm actually pregnant at the moment. You can't see this big bump under the table, but I haven't got the energy that I had in my early days. But for the first 13 years, I can say that I was a yes person, and no matter what the job was, pretty much, I would say yes, and I would show up, and I'd figure that whoever I met, whatever I was doing, if I learned something, if I progressed, if I got to practice just a great eyeliner that day, even if the photos turned out shit, even if, you know, the model wasn't ideal, whatever it was, if I was showing up, doing my craft and learning, then I was moving forward. And you just never know where those little connections and that person that you met on that set 10 years ago comes full circle, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's your next job. And if you branch your network as wide as you can, you'll always be working, because people will always know who you are across many industries and across many platforms. So I guess in that respect, that's really worked for me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I have nothing to add to that. You've said it all. It's perfect. Now, what I really want to talk about, and what I think a lot of the, I know a lot of the girls in my group, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this on YouTube want to know about, is this amazing career path that took you from Byron Bay and Sydney over to be working on fashion weeks around the world and doing luxury weddings in Europe. So tell us a little bit about that journey, how it came about, and, you know, what were some of the highlights there?
So initially, when I was living in Sydney, I had a flatmate who was from London, and she invited me to come and sleep on her couch one summer. And I, being the Aussie, you know, adventurer that I am, went, hell yeah. So off I was next summer to, you know, hang out with my friend that I'd met in Bondi in London, and just going to London and hanging out over there for the summer and meeting some of her friends and seeing this kind of bigger city world opportunity again. I got excited by the big lights, and off I went. The next year in 2008 decided to move over to London. So I applied for my ancestry visa. I was very fortunate that my granddad is English, so I could go and work over there, meaning that kind of opened up a lot of possibilities for me. And so I went to London, and my first job was in this very tacky makeover studio kind of photographic situation. But I felt so lucky to be in there, because I was doing 3 to 4 shoots a day, different clients of every ethnicity, different hair type, different, you know, skin tone. I'd never worked with African American, well, African English. I'd never worked with black models before and Afro hair. And so this was like completely new world to me, and I got all this experience. So yeah, from London, I stayed there and sort of went back and forth for the next 9 years, sort of between Sydney and London seasonally, because I don't do winter. I don't like the cold.
Oh yes, girl.
I maybe a few months here and there I like grin and bear it, but I don't do winter. So yeah, just went over and enjoyed like the summer months in Europe. And then what happened next? So Paris happened when it was through someone I met in New York. It sounds crazy, but I went to a workshop in New York, and there was a photographer who was partnered in that workshop. And this was a specialty workshop for luxury wedding industry, which was something that I was interested to get involved in. And meeting that photographer, we instantly connected, and just had a kind of really great working relationship instantly on set that day. And he happened to have a business that he ran part-time in Paris. And he said to me, oh, you know, if you're ever in the neighborhood, come over to Paris and I'll hook you up with some of my clients and recommend you. And I was like, next plane, literally. So off to Paris I went, just to try it. Initially it was like 2 weeks that I'd planned to be there. And that summer, before I'd even got there, because he'd recommended me, I'd pretty much booked out like the 2 weeks, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I got more and more bookings. So I was fully booked before I'd even arrived. And that just turned into being there for more and more months, which turned into then eventually moving there for a 9-month period. And I was working solidly based in Paris and then working in Europe. So again, it was one of those, you meet someone, you connect, you put yourself out there, an opportunity arises and you jump on it and make it happen. And it felt scary and impossible, like everything does when you sort of first go towards it, but you just have to trust. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is just trusting that you don't know how it's going to work, you don't know how it's going to come together, but you just sort of think it will and know that it will. And it kind of always does. I mean, it always has for me. So that philosophy has worked out.
Yeah, yeah. And what sort of work was that you were doing at that time? Was that fashion shoots or personal clients, weddings?
Little bit of everything. I guess my career took a turn about 7 years ago when I was living back in Australia for a while, and the bridal kind of thing started to really take hold. And again, it was someone had recommended me because I happened to be back in my hometown. I got one wedding with one wedding planner who then recommended me for 30. that then turned into 100, that then
Yeah.
turned into 300. And so it was like, oh, okay, now I'm doing all these weddings, and I had this amazing wedding portfolio. And so when I went to Europe, he specialized in weddings, luxury weddings, proposals, and that kind of area of the industry. And so I started to really focus more on that. I was still doing a little bit of editorial stuff on the side, but just every now and again. It was more kind of my focus for the last 5 years, 6 years has now been more in the bridal industry. And so Paris was, it was then taking that to the next level and trying to get into the best part of that area. And so I made it my mission. And it was the first time I'd actually done anything with focus. And it was like, okay, maybe I need to really kind of focus in on something and decide that I'm going to go in one direction and put my energy in one place. And I thought, well, the wedding industry is pretty amazing. And if I can get paid to travel to luxurious destinations and hang out in beautiful, environment with incredible weddings, then that sounds like a pretty good idea. So I started to think, well, how am I going to do this? And I did my research and spoke to people who were already doing what I wanted to do, and followed a very sort of clear path. And that led me into working with, some of the world's most kind of prestigious wedding planners at the top venues in Paris and all over Europe. And it sounds surreal to even be saying it, but it just kind of one thing, momentum started to move to the next. And I found myself on these really crazy luxury 5-day wedding events with clients coming from the Middle East, where it was like 500 people. And it was amazing. I don't know what else to say about that. I could continue, but yeah.
How important do you think having that focus and formulating that plan was to you achieving that career there?
That's when it all changed for me. When I finally stopped being the free-spirited gypsy, I'll just go with whatever kind of comes my way, and got an actual direction and a focus and decided, okay, this is where I want to be, and these are the steps I need to get there. It was complete game changer, because I had a path set, in front of me of, if I take these steps and if I get myself in front of these people and if I focus, and it was like I had an actual goal of where I was heading, It just took the stress out of it as well, because it wasn't as much like unknown of, like just kind of floundering a little bit. I felt like I actually knew where I was going, and it kind of kept the momentum going. And once I started on that path, it just built and built and continued towards it very quickly. Actually, it happened a lot faster than I thought it would. And I had a very clear goal of, like, I wanted to book a wedding at, X amount rate. And, and I wanted to get that particular client, and I really clarified who that client was, where they were coming from, who, what she read day to day, what was her interest, what was her, kind of aesthetic. And I just really focused on targeting to that particular client. And then it all just kind of came together for me.
Yeah. And what about some of the setbacks and roadblocks that you experienced on that journey?
On that particular journey, heading to, I guess, that's an interesting question. Honestly, once I got my focus and I got my momentum, it was a pretty clear run. Like, it was challenging in just the technical aspect of working in a different country, languages, getting visas, things like that were challenging. Learning how to pack an international kit and travel with all the stuff, that's not easy. The challenges of actually doing destination weddings is all the background stuff. It's logistics. It's organizing a team of people that are all coming from different countries, because those are the people that are available. I now have team members that come from London, Amsterdam, Paris, Italy, depending on who's the closest, who's available, and who's right for that job. I kind of bring people together. But when I'm doing the background of all of that and trying to book everybody's international flights, getting all their information, booking cars, getting, our accommodation, working out where the wedding is, working out how all those people are going to get there, that's the challenging part for sure. So it's logistics planning, and being really organized and making sure you've got all that stuff, because it's also a little bit out of your control. So when things go wrong, like flights get delayed or people miss their train or things like that, it's pretty scary. So you've got to have your backup plan, you've got to have your backup plan. You've always got to have yourself covered. So the stress of the high pressure, once I got into doing the really high-end weddings and relying on other people and relying on things that were outside of my own control, like, you know, transport and things like that, was definitely challenging.
Yeah. And so when you got into that side of things, it's like a completely different skill set. You know, you've gone from being the artist to being the manager, organizer, administrator. So, you know, how did you find that kind of transition? Did you miss being on the brushes?
I do miss being on the brushes. And to be honest, after 3 years of being over there and getting to the highest level in the industry that I kind of could imagine that I would get to, I can continue where I was at, but I've sort of reached the peak of working with, you know, the premium people on the highest level of weddings. So I could continue there, but in all honesty, seeing how hard it is to maintain that, it's been incredible 3 years, and I've had such an amazing experience, and it's been awesome. But I don't know if I want to be the logistics planner, and I don't know if I want to be responsible. So now I am kind of doing a bit of soul searching and coming back to heart center of, I just want to be an artist again. So that brings me to what I'll be doing, you know, next, and it's going to be a big shift. Also, now adding a baby to that is going to be another whole challenge. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's a time of change.
Absolutely. And I mean, I asked that question because I do see a lot, particularly in my local market here in Southeast Queensland, a lot of makeup artists, wedding makeup artists, who get busier and busier and busier and get to the point where they have too much work. And their automatic response is, I'm going to hire people, I'm going to start a team, I'm going to get people working for my brand under my business name. And I think sometimes that they don't really sit back and think that it is a completely different skill set, that it is a completely different day-to-day, your actual job duties that you're doing, the things that you're doing day-to-day are quite different from simply being a makeup artist, organizing your own weddings, going along and doing them. So, you know, I see a lot of people go down that path without kind of really preparing themselves and their business to go down that path, and sometimes it ends up pear-shaped, which is a little bit sad. And I think they get burnt out because they miss being an artist, as you said. So it's
kind of only two ways to really scale when you get to that level in the bridal makeup artistry industry, and it's either to go volume and have a big team of people, and generally what I've found and experienced is that if you go volume, you need to sacrifice your quality. Or you can go expensive. I decided to go expensive, but was trying to also maintain my Australian business with volume. And so it was just nutsos, because I already had a team of sort of 6 freelancers that worked for me just on a very casual basis. And I thought, okay, they'd only ever worked with me as my second artist, never as the senior artist on a job. And I love them all dearly and they're all amazing. But when it came to putting them in the forefront of being the front artist, it was just too much responsibility, because all the things that I would normally do, running the orders, getting, you know, that back and forth with the bride, to then have to do that for multiple, you know, say I had 4 bridal parties going on the one weekend and my own, which I actually did at one point when I was in London. I think I had 8 weddings or something within a 3-day period with my 5 teams across 3 different countries. I was in London, Paris and Italy myself with my multiple teams, and then I had my teams in Australia. And the head, you know, I jumble, I can't even express it as it is just thinking about it, of having all that logistical stuff going on under my control while I was actually trying to also be an artist there for my, you know, high-end clients, it was just nuts. And I realized that I had to just focus on my own lane and just do my own thing and be the best that I could be. So I went, you know, high end and went expensive and cut away all the rest of it. So you really have to think about what it is that you want to do. And I almost think, you know, you need to be a business person running it from behind the scennes and just have your artist. Don't try and be an artist in the business. You know, as well, because it takes the joy out of it. And honestly, it's not it's not the most, there's more profitable things that you could do. And if you're an artist at heart, trying to make profit off other artists, by the time the margins and the amount of work, it just doesn't add up in my experience. I mean, I know there's people that successfully do it. You just have to really ask yourself if that's the path you want to go down, because it's not about the art anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about where you're at now. So, you mentioned you've spent this 3 years over there building up this big business, and you're kind of at this crossroads. Obviously, you've mentioned being pregnant. You're back in Australia now. So how did this move back to Australia come about, and what are your plans going forward now?
Well, I guess my partner's a photographer, and we plan to, join forces and continue in the wedding industry. We can be quite focused in what we take on. I'm going to be stepping back for a little while and helping him out in the business, ironically, which is what I not necessarily want to be doing right now, but it works for the time being. And then I'll be getting back to my artwork and my passion sort of later on, once my little one's a little bit older. So I'm going to be having a break for a little while from actually stepping out. And to feed my creativity, I'm thinking that a nice sort of happy medium is to be setting up a little home studio and focusing a bit on the content creation space and doing more beauty shoots and doing actual art from home. So I'm not going to be traveling as much, and I'm not going to be out there with my brides as much, but I plan to be creating from home while I'm helping my partner set up his photography business. That's the short term, next year or so. And then eventually, when our little one's a bit older, we will be doing seasonal work in Europe just a few months a year, rather than being over there for 9 months. We might go for 3 just for the summers and do very selective projects, just to keep that going, because it's nice to just go and do a few special weddings a year. So yeah, that's kind of the plan at the moment, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And that work that you have in Europe and that you're planning to do in Europe, is that through your network of contacts? Are you working for someone else over there, like subcontracting, or how does that actually kind of come together?
So because I've built up such an amazing network, and the relationships that I've built with the wedding planners, the photographers and the venues, I'm still daily getting inquiries, for the weddings that are happening this season. I've had to sadly turn down a lot of work over in Europe this season.
Yeah.
Just letting people know that I'm coming back in 2021. And so I'll be back just for the summer season to take on those special projects. And I'm fortunate that because I have built up such a kind of momentum over in Europe, that I do get those projects coming through from all the people that I've already worked with. So it's I'd say 95% through recommendation, because of the high end kind of special area of the market. It's very niche, and it's very sort of, I don't know, it's like a little inner circle. And once you build trust within that circle, you kind of get quite a good name, very quickly. So it's targeting those specific people that I wanted to work with, and that's where the work comes in from. And I guess maintaining those relationships.
Again, that just brings it all back to the importance of your network, and as you say, building and maintaining those relationships. All right, awesome. What I want to do now is, we've got the people in the Makeup Mastermind group who are here watching live, and I can see there's quite a few people there. So I want to open it up to you guys. If you have any questions for Ava now, thinking back over your long and amazing career, what would you say is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
A makeup artist I assisted told me one day that it was a stayer's race, and it's not necessarily about being the best or the most talented. It's about showing up, and it's about sticking at it, and it's the people who really stay with it that succeed. There's those few lucky ones, that just get, some amazing break. It's still hard work for them, I'm sure. But for the majority of people, I think it's a stayer's race. So that's the business side of things. And then for actually doing makeup, I'm going to go back to my beautiful Ray Morris, who taught me so well. And she said, do the hard things first. So if you're actually doing a client and you're doing makeup, if you've got to do, an intense red lip, or that's got to be perfect, do it first, and then do the foundation that could take, 5 minutes. if you've got an eye, do the eye, make it about the thing that's hardest first, and then whatever you can kind of get through quickly, you can do that later, and give yourself a bit of you can rush on those things. So do the hard thing first. That has helped me through many stressful occasions. Yeah,
absolutely. And I do love that comment about it being a stayer's race, and that's something I say a lot too. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And we were talking before the interview, before we came live, about exactly that, and I related the first TV commercial that I worked on. I thought, oh, that's it, I've made it now, I've got my TV commercial. But it wasn't like that. There is no such thing as a lucky break. It takes a lot of hard work, consistent work, and kind of keeping going.
Absolutely, just showing up every day, doing your best, and always bringing your best, always having your kit ready, always being prepared. It's tough, but you just have to keep showing up and loving it and keep that passion, I think, is another thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so what's one piece of advice that you would give to other makeup artists who are kind of at the beginning of their journey?
In the very beginning, try out a few different things so you can figure out very quickly what it is that you like and what you don't like. And as soon as you can figure that out, choose the person who is the best in the industry at the thing that it is that you want to do, and make it your mission in life to get yourself in front of them and learn from them. Because the people that teach you are going to be the people that take you where you want to be. So for me, that was Ray Morris. I got myself in front of her. I did everything I could. I went to every workshop she did. I went and saw her speak live. I went and put my cards in her hands, and I got to have a lot of FaceTime with her, and she mentored me, and she changed my life and my career and opened doors I couldn't have even imagined opening. So get yourself in front of the people that you want to be like, and assist them and learn from them. Clean their brushes, show up, do it for free, never complain, and just give it everything you've got.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Definitely, finding that successful person and modeling what they've done, I think, is one of the best ways to obviously to emulate their success and to become successful in your own right.
Absolutely.
Ashley wants to ask, where do you find your mainstream of clients are coming from at the moment? Is it social media, Facebook or Instagram? Is it your website, online searches, word of mouth, or through your networks? She's kind of given you a whole load of
all of the above
there. Yeah.
Make sure you're covering all bases, all of the above. When I was working in Paris, I location hashtagged the heck out of my images, and I got quite a few inquiries to the specific locations. That's actually also how I got all these unique destinations, was hashtagging places where there were no other makeup artists that were going to be offering the services, but they were luxury weddings. So when you look up Venice makeup artists, for example, you want to come up in the top. So that was one thing that really helped in getting work overseas. You don't even have to be there to be getting inquiries from those places if you're using the hashtags correctly. And then obviously targeting wedding planners and people that you want to work with, or photographers if it's fashion industry, or the people who are, the heads of departments in film and TV and things like that. So target those people. And website's really important so that there's social proof. Instagram is great. For me, I want to focus more in that space now, but it's been, it's always been enough to get me work. Yeah. So all different channels.
Bit of everything.
And then obviously other artists recommending as well. And that comes back to network. And I've always seen other artists as my strength and my community. And as many jobs as I can recommend other people for, it comes back to you. So keep your artists close to you. Never see them as competition, and always build a community, and that will see you through for sure.
Just while we're waiting for any last questions, Ava, is there anything else that you would like to add? Anything that we haven't covered today?
I think there was a question you did ask me that I've just looked back over that I didn't come to, and that was a real highlight for me, which was Paris Fashion Week.
Yes. We didn't really talk about the fashion.
No, Fashion Week sort of thing. Yeah. So that was something that from when I was in high school and I watched my first, Paris Fashion Week runway shows in I think sewing class or something, it just was like, oh my God, what is this? I want to be part of it. And it was on my bucket list of, I'm going to be backstage there one day. So when I was in Paris, I was really lucky. One of the artists that was ahead for the creative director for her, what was it, Paris Haute Couture Fashion Week, found me through Instagram and actually asked me if I would come and join their team, because I was focusing on weddings at that point and my fashion sort of thing wasn't so much at the forefront, but I'd always done a little bit. I obviously jumped at the chance. So when I got to go and work on Paris Haute Couture Fashion Week and join his team, it was, a real highlight, just being backstage with all the dresses and the glamour in this amazing venue. And that was something that was really sort of stand out, pinch me moment. And it happened organically. And I don't know if I'm going too off topic esoteric, but I am a big believer in the power of the law of attraction and manifesting things. So I've got my little vision board and I've got my things that, the magazine covers I want to be on, the photographers I want to work with, the planners. I put it all there, and it's actually quite remarkable to go back and, one by one, just tick off those very unique things. And Paris Fashion Week was one of them, and it did come to me. So I was pretty happy about that.
I could not agree more in the power of, what you put out is what you get. Asking for what you want, whether that be through having a vision board, through writing down those goals every day, but just
absolutely
that manifesting.
I kind of give it almost the biggest power of anything that's come into my life, because when I do really focus and I look at where, like when I look at where I want to go, and then 5 years later I'll find some vision board and I'll go, oh my God, I've done everything on there. Like how that, there's got to, I've sort of over the years, the more and more I've seen that connection and really had to sort of go, well, that just can't be, there's too many of them to sort of think that that's coincidence. So I've sort of started to really give it some power. It gets really fun when you make the connection and then start doing it a bit more purposefully. So let's see what we can bring in next time.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions here. Okay, Melissa's just clarifying it was for the 5th Pirates of the Caribbean movie for the work experience. I think Melissa was actually on that movie, so
fantastic. There you go. I think it was the 5th one that I was on as well.
Okay,
it was only a short stint. I was meant to be on much longer, and during the filming something happened to Johnny, and the whole production shut down for the month that I was meant to be there. Then I had to go back to London. So honestly, I wasn't on it for as long as I would have liked to have been or was meant to have been, but I've had enough of an experience to understand what it was all about. It's pretty amazing.
And then I just had another question there with regards to your team. Whether do you pay them assistant rate by the hour or per head? So I guess the question is more, do you take on people as assistants, or are you taking them on as second artists? I guess depending on their responsibility.
All of the above, So I take on junior assistants, depending on their experience, and sometimes my junior assistants will purely come on and work for me for the experience of it. So I don't pay them, and that's depending on what the job is as well. So if that's an editorial where I'm not getting paid, they don't get paid. Simple as that. When it's a wedding and they've had more experience, I usually either pay a day rate or an hourly rate, depending on what the situation is. Then I've got my sort of higher up artists that will actually travel with me. So I had an artist that was living with me, not living with me, but living in Paris at the same time I was there. And she would fly out to Italy with me for jobs. And, then it's obviously gets a bit more complicated. It's a sort of contract, and it's however many people, are on that day, and such. It might be a 3-day wedding, and she'll be there and assist me and do people. It really is a case by case, and you just have to work that out with your artists and work out. I just think whatever's fair, and if I'm making good money, I pay my artists good money, and if I'm making not so much, well, they make a percentage of that. So
Now, Ava, please let us know where we can find out more about you. What's your Instagram, your website, all that sort of stuff. And I will pop them in the comments and on the screen so everyone can go and see a lot more about your work and find out about what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is avabell.co, pretty simple. And that focuses mainly on my weddings and destination wedding work. I have an Instagram that aligns with that, and that's Ava Bell Luxury. And my new space where I'm going to be putting a lot more energy is Ava Bell Makeup, and that's going to be more tutorial based, beauty based, a little bit more editorial, and something that's more, really not, it's moving away from the bridal sort of space. So that's something to keep a watch on for upcoming Yeah,
Beautiful.
updates.
Yeah. Can I just clarify that website is .co, not .com?
.co.
.co.
Yeah,
Okay,
.co.
perfect. All right. So I just want to take this opportunity to say a massive thank you to you, Ava, for spending your time with us this morning. I think I was actually, I don't know if anyone noticed, I was kind of looking down. I took a few notes while we were there. There's a few great little sound bites, I think they call them. The power of the magical box. I love that. That what got you into makeup.
Yeah.
And I visualized that you being on stage and as a small child. I don't know if you were a small child, but
I was 10 years old.
yeah, exactly.
Dressed
And
up as
seeing,
Judy Garland in my red,
yeah,
blue
the
shoes. Yeah.
red shoes. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that you've given a lot of really fantastic advice, and I'm seeing loads and loads of hearts popping up on the Facebook Live. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone who has joined us live.
Yes, thank you so much.
And for those of you who aren't here live but are watching back on YouTube on the replay, thank you very much for watching it all to the end.
Thank you so much for having me. That was wonderful. Thanks again.